Hello again, welcome back. Arch here. It's been a long time since I made a video. I kind of gave up with the beta. I fell behind with it because I was so busy, and then I went on holiday, and then at that point there was just so much to catch up on that I sort of gave up and figured I'll wait until everything goes live. So here we are, patch 5.0.4 is now out, everything is live, so I can now make a complete Affliction guide for you at 85. This is pre-Mr. Pandaria, but not really a whole lot changes, to be honest with you. Mr. Pandaria, or even at level 90, we only get 2 other abilities, which no doubt I will cover as and when I get there. What I'll do in this video is I'll go through all the basic spells, talents, glyphs, what you've gained, what you've lost, how they work together. Then I'll do an Ultraxion LFR fight, so you can actually see it in action, see how everything actually runs. And then probably do a breakdown afterwards of the damage to actually see how it's changed compared to previous patch 5.0.4. So let's just jump straight into it, shall we? Firstly, talents. Now, as you all know, the talent tree has now changed from your standard 3 specs and you work your way down the talent tree to this 6 tier, 3 choices per tier. You get 1 tier open every 15 levels. The talent spec I use is pretty generic. I mean, it works for most fights. There is the odd fight where you can change 1 or 2 about to maybe give you a slight boost, but it's never really a boost. It's more sort of situational and just helps you a little bit. Maybe it makes the healer's job easier or gives you some sort of ability to help out with soaking one of the boss's abilities or helping do something, etc, etc. So generally you don't have to worry too much about your spec. The one I use is I go for Harvest Life just for increased AoE, sort of more instant AoE. It's not as potent as Seed of Corruption spam, but as you know, Seed of Corruption now takes quite a while to explode. So if it's something that needs to die very quickly and there's a lot of people attacking it and it is dying very quickly, often Seed of Corruption won't have a chance to explode. So it's very useful to have this there to just hit it and just start damaging everything immediately. It's also very useful for healing you up. Like if there's an AoE phase and you're taking a lot of damage, Harvesting Life will make the healer's job a lot easier because it does heal you for quite a substantial amount, to be honest with you. Second tier, I tend to just go with Mortal Coil. You know, very rarely do you need Shadow Fury in boss fights. There is probably the odd boss fight where you might want to use it, but I tend to just have Mortal Coil here just because I did like to use Death Coil in the past, and it does help when you get into a cinch just to heal yourself 15% nice and quickly. Third tier, now you can use either Sacrificial Pact or Dark Bargain. It probably depends on what spec you're playing. I'd imagine if you're using Demonology you probably want to go Sacrificial Pact, but because Affliction you go for Grimoire of Sacrifice and you get rid of your pet, Dark Bargain is just a bit more useful. Can be quite helpful as long as your healers are on the ball. If you've got good healers and you communicate with them when you're going to use it, when it's running out, when you're going to need healing, you know, then it is actually a really useful talent, to be honest. So it does help you soak a lot and things like Ultraxion and stuff like that. Third tier, I go for Burning Rush just for the movement increase, very useful. Unbound Will is pretty much the same as your Every Man for Himself, Human Racial. Not many boss fights where you'd actually need to use it, more I guess PvP, but it's quite a healthy cost, so I wouldn't be too sure about that. And again, Blood Fear is be more of a PvP thing, to be honest, but I don't really PvP, so I don't look at that, to be honest. And fifth tier, now at the minute it's simming out that Grimoire of Sacrifice for Affliction is the highest damage output, so when you sacrifice it you get 50% extra damage. Now the wording's very funny about it. I think it increases, from what I could tell, it's very confusing trying to read the actual mechanics of it. It increases the damage of Malefic Grasp, Fell Flame and Drain Soul and Haunt, I think, by 50%, but I think it's your dots only increased by 25%. They might be 50% as well, I can't remember, didn't look at the exact numbers of it, but it is at the minute the most powerful talent to take. If you don't want to take that and you do want to keep your pet, then Grimoire of Supremacy and using the Observer is the highest DPS choice you can take after Sacrifice. Grimoire of Service is not so much, unless it's a fight where there's a 20-second window where he takes like Magmar, say, when he takes 100% increased damage. Then maybe Grimoire of Service will be a bit better. Not sure, I haven't bothered looking into it because Grimrar Sacrifice is just the most powerful one at the minute. Level 90 obviously haven't reached yet, but I'll probably take a, a choice in that when I get there. I'm thinking maybe kill Jaden's Cunning, but maybe I can. It's probably differ from fight to fight as to which you want to use. AoE fights, you're going to want to use that. If you've got to fight a lot of movement, you're going to use that. Or if you're going to fight where you take a lot of damage, you're going to want to use that. So, you know, as always, the Tanks are pretty situational. That's the spec I'm using at the minute. Works pretty well in every fight, so that's the one I'd advise as just your basic running around spec. Glyphs. Again, these are changed now, so they don't ever have that much of a effect on like DPS or etc. like that. They're mainly for utility than anything. What I use is soul shards to increase your soul shards by 1, and soul swap, so you can do your old school thing of dotting one up, soul swap, and put one to a second target. And finally, Siphon Life for healing you for 20% of the damage corruption deals, just to make it easier for the healers. I also then use Nightmares for running over water, Subtlety to hide when I'm out of combat, and Soul Well just because why not? You know what I mean? It's either that or Soulstone, but nah. There isn't. No, Soulstone's a major. Never mind. The other options you've got are obviously Soulstone to increase your Soulstone health regen when they come alive. Now, if you've got druids, I mean we have a lot of druids in our raid, so I don't go for it. But you could probably swap it for Glyph of Soul Swap. I mean, Glyph of Soul Swap on a fight where it's just a single target boss, you're not really going to need it because you just won't need it. So, you know, you could use Soulstone. Obviously, they've made it very easy to swap glyphs in and out, so you can do it on a boss-by-boss basis, but I really just don't bother because I'm lazy, if anything, to be honest with you. So, I don't. Life Tap's quite interesting. Instead of taking your health off immediately, it then absorbs the next 25,000 healing received over the next 30 seconds. So if you're never taking damage and so if you're never taking damage, it's probably better because you're never going to receive healing, so you don't need to worry about it. And your own self-healing will probably soak this up anyway. So yeah, it's quite an interesting one. Will stop you, the healers getting pissed off with you, you know, life tapping your life down. But MP5 at the minute is pretty high. I'm not sure whether it's meant to be or not. I mean, I'll only life tap a couple of times per fight, like maybe like 2, 3, 4 times, and generally the MP5. I think I looked at a breakdown, and the MP5 received mana gained through MP5 was like 75% of my mana gained on a fight, and life tap was only like 25%. So at the minute you're regenerating a lot of mana, and obviously I don't have any spirit, so it's just base mana. But yeah, so that's just slightly different. Usual ones that obviously you're not going to need if because you're sacrificing your pet. Now Dark Soul at the minute, I'm in two minds about this at the minute. I'm trying to do some calculations to figure out as to whether or not it's a bonus, because it basically takes 10% off of the actual use. So instead of giving 30% haste for 20 seconds, it only gives you 20% haste. But then when it's not on cooldown, it gives you 10% haste, like passive. So the thought behind this would be you either use your Demon Soul unglyphed on cooldown, so you get 30% for 20 seconds every 2 minutes, or don't use it at all and have the glyph so that you have a passive 10% constantly. Because obviously as soon as you use it, you're going to get 20% bonus, but then for 2 minutes you're not gonna have anything. So it's like I'm trying to figure out whether having 10% passively or having 30% for 20 seconds every 2 minutes works out more. I'm sure someone somewhere who's much cleverer and better at maths than me has figured it out, but I'm yet to find it. So at the minute it's sort of umming and ahhing about that one. Very, very tricky decision. So that's but Unstable Affliction, I don't bother using that one. And where's the other one I said not to use? Where is it? Is it major or Everlasting Affliction? Now, increases duration by 50% but reduces the damage by 20% on like fights with lots of targets. Yeah, and this is probably, I think it was simmed out as a DPS increase, but on a single target fight it's a decrease, obviously. So yeah, don't bother using it really. There's not really a whole lot of talent choices, to be honest with you, because it's obviously they're spread out across the 3 specs, and none of them really give you a damage increase. You know, so they're all pretty situational and just pretty much utility more than anything. So it's quite a boring system now. But so that's the glyphs I use. That's the talents I use. So now let's look through the abilities that you've gained and what you've lost. First biggest change is you've lost Shadow Bolt as Affliction. You no longer use Shadow Bolt as your filler. You're now basically a Shadow Priest in essence of sort of spells. You've got your usual Agony, which is no longer Curse of Agony, it's now just Agony, Corruption and Unstable Affliction. You don't have Curse of Doom anymore, that's gone. They did for a little bit sort of do a glyph which changed it and added it in, but they've got rid of that and it's just Agony, Corruption and Unstable Affliction now. Your new filler, instead of Shadow Bolt, is called Malefic Grasp, which is a channel cast like Mind Flay, like I'm saying with Shadow Priest, and it casts, and every time it deals damage, unbuffed, it's 4-second cast, deals damage every second, doesn't hit for a lot of damage, but when it does, it causes your dots, so Agony, Corruption, Unstable Affliction, to instantly deal 50% of the normal periodic damage. Now they changed this to how it used to be, where it increased the haste of them by 100%, and I'm pretty sure they did this because the game mechanics just couldn't handle it, and it just caused so many problems that they just figured, oh, how about every time it does damage, it causes your dots to do damage. So that's what it does now. Whenever it deals damage, your dots automatically deal damage. So you're getting a lot of dot ticks going on, basically. Haunt has now slightly changed as well. It's no longer limited to one target. It now costs a soul shard. It didn't cost a soul shard before, obviously, but it was limited to one target. And now it's only 25% extra damage for 8 seconds, as opposed to on beta it was like 40% for a little bit, and then on live before that I believe it was 20% with a glyph, add 3% to it, so it was 25%. So it's 25% for 8 seconds, but costs a soul shard. Now your Nightfall has changed, obviously, because you don't have Shadow Bolt anymore, so you can't get instant Shadow Bolts for free. So Nightfall now, whenever it procs, gives you a soul shard back. And the way they've sort of built the mechanics around it, you have a stacking over time. The percent chance of you getting a proc goes up and up and up and up, but it works out as a baseline of about, I think they said it's about 10%, maybe 5%. I think it might be 5% baseline chance of getting it per tick. So I find that you generally have enough procs. I do anyway. You rarely find yourself lacking of soul shards, but if you do, not to worry. Drain Soul's now changed. Still a long 15-second cast, deals damage every 2 seconds, and then every 2 times it deals damage, it gives you back a soul shard. So if you're channeling, it'll hit, and the second time it hits, you'll get a new soul shard. It'll hit, the next time it hits, you'll get another soul shard. Hit, and so on and so forth. It does okay amount of damage, and then under 20%, still does 100% more damage under 20%, but when it's under 20%, it causes your dots to automatically deal 100% of the normal periodic damage whenever it ticks. So when you're draining, you're going to have the first tick, it will cause your dots to do 100% extra, damage, and then the second tick will do it again, also you get a soul shard. Third tick, damage, fourth tick, damage and soul shard. So that's what's changed in our execute. You're still using Drain Soul under 20%, but it's just slightly different how the damage is, where the damage comes from, basically. Dark Soul, now we sort of spoke about this earlier with the glyph, now it's changed how it used to be. It used to be based on what pet you were using, which was really annoying for things like demonology and pet twisting and etc, etc. Now it's based on what spec you are. So for Affliction it's 30% haste, for Destruction it's 30% crit, and for demonology it's mastery. I don't think it's a percentage, I think it's a flat value, which works out as percentage obviously. So that's how that's changed, which for Affliction is quite useful. Although one could argue that Affliction could use Mastery as well, but it's nice to have the 30% haste. Harvest Life, as you've seen in the Glyph, in the talents. Curse of Elements is now only 5% instead of 13%, if I remember, or then it dropped down to 8, can't remember, but it's now only 5%. A couple other people bring it as well, so you might not always need to bring it. I do it out of habit now more than anything. Fell Flame instantly deals damage, still instant, pretty quick. Increases corruption and unstable affliction duration now, but again, it's not worth doing that over casting the dots. You still want to, you only want to do this during movement phases. That's it. Only during movement phases, no other time like that. Dark Intent has completely changed. It's now just a 10% spell power buff for an hour for the raid, so you don't have that whole stacking things and trying to find an optimum target to put your DI on. And people argue saying, "Oh, I want DI, I want DI. I'm a Resto Druid, I want DI. No, I'm a Shadow Priest, I want DI." Fuck off, right? It's gone, which is, I'm glad, because it was bloody annoying. And then you now actually have a couple of cooldowns, which makes it very nice for things like Ultraxion, because I remember doing Ultraxion as a Warlock, you were never in the loop of, like, you know, who can soak, who can do this. It was never you, just always out. But now you actually can. So with the talent one, Dark Bargain, you could, because it prevents all damage for 8 seconds. 50% of that is dealt over the next 8 seconds. So it's basically 50% damage reduction for starters, but then the other 50% is spread out over 8 seconds, which makes it a lot more manageable. So that's 3-minute cooldown. You then also have Unending Resolve, which is a baseline ability for all specs, which is 40% damage reduction, immune to silencing for 8 seconds, which is again very useful. And then with Grimoire of Sacrifice, when you sacrifice a pet, not only do you get the damage buff, you also get an ability based on what pet it was. So let's show you now for Succubus. Ah, crap, I forgot. 2-minute cooldown on summoning. Or sacrificing. Never mind. I'll just go through it. Succubus, you get Seduction, which is another 30-second CC. You have an ability called Command Demon, which changes when you have a demon out or when you sacrifice a demon. So that's what you want to put on your bars for when you sacrificed it to be able to use their ability. So Succubus is a 30-second crowd control. Fell Hunter is your spell lock, which every Affliction Warlock should remember. Fell Imp is Cauterized Master, which deals a tiny bit of damage to you, but heals you up for 15% of your maximum health over the next. Actually, it's up here. Let's have a look. Where is it? Yeah. 12% over 12 seconds. So I think it takes off about 1% of your health in return for 12%. So it's actually an 11% heal, which is very nice. It's quite potent. And Voidwalker gives you another cooldown you can use along with all the other cooldowns. It's basically Last Stand, 30% health for 20 seconds, which is really quite useful and quite a really long duration. So that's your that's the abilities you get from sacrificing a pet. I tend to sacrifice a Voidwalker, as you'll see in Ultraxion, mainly because of the cooldown. I mean, I rarely need to spell lock. There's only a couple of fights where I ever need to interrupt. I fucking never need to CC on boss fights, so that's out the window. Even if I did, I just fear them. And when it comes to using Cauterized to heal yourself, I mean, I've got Mortal Coil, I've got Drain Life, I've got Health Stones, you know, I've got 20% coming from Corruption. I could change a glyph out to get, you know, 20% of all damage I deal coming back as health. You've got so much self-healing that you're not really going to need it. And you've got a baseline of 2% of your maximum health coming back every 5 seconds from sacrificing your pet, as you can see there. It restores 2% of maximum health every 5 seconds. So you've got so much self-healing coming. In fact, I remember I did Ultraxion, well, we did a raid Demon Soul on Wednesday when the patch came out, and Ultraxion, I mean, it died quite quickly because the damage is so high now and they've got so little health, but I healed myself more on Ultraxion than either of our 2 healers healed me. I think total healing on me was 44.2% from me, so it's like, okay, that's a lot of self-healing, so that will help the healers out a lot. So I tend to just go with the cooldown so that whenever you need it, if there's some high damage incoming, just to give yourself a bit more of a buffer, which is always very useful. You've got obviously your usual curses for enfeeblement, exhaustion, and elements. Soul Well's now changed. You no longer need to. It's no longer like a ritual type thing. It's just a 2-second cast with a 2-minute cooldown. So you don't need loads of people to click it anymore. You can just cast it and then bam, Soul Well drops down in front of you. Sweet, get yourself a Hearthstone. because as any Warlock will know, trying to summon a Soul Well and just be like, can't people click it, you know, it's just like, oh my god, just click the fucking thing. So that's changed in about bloody time too. Summoning still needs 2 people to click it, but that's acceptable because that's summoning, so that's that. Health zones have changed. Now 3 charges for 20% of your health. I haven't checked in fight as to whether you can use it more than once per fight. I'm imagining not, but it gives you 3 charges now, so you don't have to create a new one every single fight. You know, you will actually have them for a couple of fights, so that's really useful, really useful. Soul Stone, it no longer creates an item which you then use to resurrect somebody, as we all know was fucking stupid and pointless. It now just, if you cast it on a dead target, it revives them. If you cast it on an alive target, it stores their soul. So basically they just got rid of the item part of it and just incorporate that all into a single spell, which makes sense. I don't see why they didn't do that anyway. Twilight Ward now absorbs Holy as well as Shadow, so I want to remember that, keep that in mind, because it's very useful to have. And that is most of your spells, really. I mean, Seed of Corruption's now, the spell coefficient's been finally updated to from, I think it's Vanilla or Burning Crusade, so that it doesn't explode instantly anymore. The damage needed before it explodes is a lot higher, so you can actually get like 3, 4, maybe even 5, maybe even 6, depending on how much of a cast time you've got, up on the targets before they explode. And obviously the first one will cause the others to explode, which is really nice for like bursting down like huge amounts of damage, because you just get like 5 or 6 up, and then about 3, well maybe like a second after you've got the 5th or 6th up, they'll all explode, and it was just absolute carnage. I remember I was doing it and I went from like 10,000 DPS just from the dots, and then they all exploded, and I shot up to like 80,000 DPS just because there was so much damage so fast and everything just died. So that's really, really good AoE at the minute. It's not the strongest AoE. Affliction's still behind, I think, on AoE compared to Demonology and Destruction, but it's good enough, you know. And with Harvest Life, you've got very fast, instant AoE. Your Soul Burn costs a Soul Shard still, but obviously you're regenerating Soul Shards. But you've now got quite a few more choices, because I remember with Affliction, literally the only choice you had for Soul Burn was Soulfire once you got your 4 set. Before then there was not much point doing it, but now you've got Seed of and it's obviously Seed of Corruption. Seed of Corruption for Explode, put Corruption on all the targets, which also refunds you a Soul Shard, so you don't have to worry about that. Good thing to note, Seed of Corruption and Corruption now stack, so if you've got Corruption on the target, you don't have to worry about putting a seed on it and then, you know, wiping off the Corruption. They're 2 different spells now. They do stack, so you can put an Empowered Seed up on one target and then put a couple of seeds up and everything else, and obviously that'll explode, and then they'll have Corruption. You can continue to use Seed of Corruption whilst they have Corruption on them. You don't have to worry about wiping off your dots, so that is about time they changed that. If you use Soul Burn on any of your curses, so Curse of Elements or Enfeeblement or Exhaustion, it puts it on everything within a 10-yard radius, or 15-yard for Curse of Elements. So that's quite useful for certain fights, like on Madness, very last platform, when the bloods come up and you've got to slow them down before they get to Deathwing. You know, using the Soul Burn, Curse of Exhaustion is very good for slowing them down, because you obviously no longer have Shadow Flame, so you can't use the slow mechanic on that with the Glyph. So that's pretty much your only AoE slow now. You have now probably the best Soul Burn, which you'll use every single fight, is Soul Burn, Soul Swap. If you use Soul Burn, Soul Swap, instantly applies Corruption, Unstable Affliction, and Agony. So it's like, bam, open the fight, I've got all 3 dots on the target, let's fucking go, let's do this. No more ramp up time. You don't have Shadow Embrace anymore, so you don't have to worry about, once you've got your 3 stacks of Shadow Embrace, which come from Haunt or Shadow Bolt, it's just dots full power straight away, so you don't have to worry about multi-dotting anymore. It has improved your multi-dotting considerably, but obviously you still got a lot more single target damage thanks to Malefic Grasp, causing your dots to tick more often. What other Soul Burns do we have? Soul Burn Harvest Life increases the healing received. You're not really gonna use that too much. Soul Burn Demon Circle, that you don't get that actually till level 90 or 86 or something like that, where after you've teleported, oh no wait, you do get it now. After you teleported, 50% movement increase, and your movement and your immune to snares. I'd imagine that's more of a PvP thing than anything, to be honest with you. I can't think of any others that I actually use. Oh yeah, Soulburn Health Funnel instantly heals them. But yeah, you're not really going to use that because you don't have a pet. So I don't even know why it's on my bars. Never mind. Soul Shatter is still the same, 90% reduction threat within all enemies in 50 yards. Still the most overpowered threat dump in the game. Fucking brilliant. And that's pretty much it. You have considerably less spells than you did before. I remember before I had the spells I needed on my bars, and then I had extra spells which I needed ideally, but wasn't used all that often, so I had them on shift 2. But now it's pretty much like you can see I've got a gap there, like two spaces, because I just ran out of spells. I didn't have anything else I needed on my bars, so yeah, you don't have as much to do anymore. It's not as complicated as it used to be honest. I don't want to say it's a lot easier because I don't like to dumb down my own performance, but it's not as complex. Let's put it that way. It's a lot easier to grasp now than it was. So from what I can tell, I'm pretty much covered all of the spells and glyphs and talents. So what I'll do now is we'll cut to Ultraxion, show you the fight. I'll walk you through as it's happening, and then after that we'll go to the really sort of nitty gritty side of stat weightings and what damage is coming from where, etc, after that. So I'll cut to Ultraxion now, and then we'll carry on from there. And here we are in Dragon Soul Ultraxion LFR 25. So now we're going to need to be in a raid, so you want to be buffing spell power. You're going to be getting your pet ready so you can sacrifice it. Like I said, I tend to go with Void Walker just to give you the 30% last stand health sort of cooldown, just because it's very situational, very useful. But obviously certain fights might require you to use a different pet. Come Mr. Pandaria, sacrifice it. Now the sacrifice buff is only 20-minute duration, so you want to bear that in mind. It's a bit annoying, it doesn't last a lot longer, but you have to deal with. Why? I need someone to buff stats. Why? Oh, hang on a minute. No trash. Okay. Boss incoming. Right, let's head over to where it is. And get ready. Now, there's not a lot of prep. I mean, you buff your spell power, you get your pet out and you kill it, and then maybe put soul well down if you need it. Right, now what I would do as the fight starts is before the fight engages, I pop my soul burn so you don't waste the GCD once the fight's going. So then hit my volcanic potion just before you engage, hit your dark soul, get your soul swap up so you've got instant dots, haunt, curse of elements, start malefic grasp immediately. So you've got massive, huge, immediate damage. I mean, look at that, I've already leapt ahead of everybody on the meter, keeping your haunt up, really burning through the haunts to make sure you've got 100% uptime at the start whilst you've got your Dark Soul and your Volcanic Potion and all of your cooldowns up along with your Doom Guard. Obviously you want to pop that at the very beginning as soon as all of your procs have lined up and everything's up and active. You've got the maximum amount of spell power. Now with Haunt I always suggest firing it off so you can time it so that the Haunt lands just before the previous Haunt buff wears off, because that means your Haunt is going to have 25% increased damage as well. Now your Haunt is really hard hitting. I get 100, 110k crits with my Haunts, so you really get, that's a lot of damage to be able to get 25% extra on that. I didn't bother phasing out on this because it's only LFR. I was popping some cooldowns just to see how much damage reduction it does. I mean, LFR you don't need to bother anyway because it's so little damage. So burn through your soul shards at the very beginning, make sure you've got 100% Haunt uptime, whilst you've got obviously all your cooldowns lined up, your potion up, your dark soul up and everything like that. It's very straightforward mechanic, rotation. Keep your unstable affliction comes up as soon as it's about to wear off, keep your corruption up. Agony now, as you can see, stacks up to 10 now, so once it hits 10 stacks you want to make sure you do not let your agony drop off. Refresh it just before it's about to disappear to make sure you get a maximum DPT. And then keep your malefic grasp in between. You never want to be on 4 soul shards. You never want to hit 4, because if you hit 4 then you're wasting, you've got a possible waste of a nightfall proc. If you get down to 0 and you haven't, you've just had a nightfall proc and now you're on 0, so there's not going to be another proc for a little while, you want to use your drain soul to get your soul shards up. I'd only really recommend getting back maybe 2 at maximum, because whilst you're drain souling, you're going to probably get a corruption proc anyway, which will take you up to like 3. So you want to drain soul until you've got about 2 or 3 soul shards, so you can continue keeping your haunt applied and keeping all your dots and your malefic grass turning over. Now at this point I didn't bother reusing my demon soul because the health of the boss left. I wouldn't be able to then have my demon soul up for 20% execute phase, so I wanted to save it for that point because obviously that's a higher DPS gain because I was only going to get to use it one more time, so I expect to use it then rather than now. I did mess up a couple of times with my haunt timings and refreshing a little bit too early and wasting 2 or 3 seconds of the soul shard, but generally it went quite well in this attempt and I didn't really make any mistakes. All my dots were refreshed pretty much at the right time. I never let agony drop off. And as you can see, I mean, you have to watch it really carefully. I only really life tap like 2 or 3 times in the entire fight because your mana regen is usually pretty good. So, I mean, as you can see at Recount in the bottom right there, the damage is just fucking insane. But as you can see, we're coming up to 20% now, ready for the execute phase. Now, how I'd always do this is I'd always make sure I've got at least 1 soul shard up, ready for as soon as I hit 20%, you've got the haunt buff there for when you immediately start drain souling. Because once you start drain souling, you are not going to have a shortage of soul shards, because obviously every second tick you're going to get a shard back. So you want to continue exactly the same as before, keeping your haunt buff up, which you'll be able to do 100% because of your extra soul shards. And then instead of malefic grasping, you want to be drain souling, keeping up unstable affliction, corruption, and curse and agony, popping as I did here demon soul, and again another potion just to go for the extra damage. Now the damage goes up in quite a fair bit during your execute phase. I think it increases by a good 10,000 DPS maybe. But the execute doesn't really change much to the rest of the encounter, other than the fact that you want to be haunting on, you know, before the buff comes up to make sure the haunt hits with the 25% damage. And now that he's dead, we'll go look at the breakdown and see how everything went. So we'll start off looking at the Simcraft numbers for 5.04. Now they've put them up there. This is the table ranking you can see from their website of all classes, DPS classes for the rankings in tier 14 normal mode gear. As you can see, Affliction Warlock's doing really well, just marginally ahead of Fire, but right up there at the top, miles ahead of Demonology and considerably even further ahead of Destruction. So we're looking like we're in a good position going forward into Mr. Pandaria. Obviously, a lot could change. You never know whether they're gonna nerf us to the ground or not. But at the minute, it's looking really nice. Now, this is the Simulation Craft breakdown of Warlock, particularly for tier 14 normal mode. No, this is tier 14 heroic. Sorry. This is looking only at Warlocks, looking at the difference between the 3 specs. And again, as you can see, Affliction's still quite a chunk ahead of Demonology, and then even further ahead of Destruction still, looking at tier 14 heroic. So even looking towards the end of the first tier in Miss Pandaria, Affliction's still looking very strong indeed. So fingers crossed it'll stay that way and they hopefully won't destroy it. Now what's good about this is using the Simulation Craft, they're able then to tell you what stats gave you what the highest damage increase per point, basically your stat weightings. Now, what's interesting is what's changed. Now, I knew off the top of my head that Mastery had more value as of 5.0 previously, before 5.0. Now, I thought Mastery had gone up to above Crit, but what I didn't realise is, as you can see there, Mastery is actually now above Haste. So, whilst our stat rating before was Haste, Crit, and Mastery at the lowest, it's now Mastery, Haste, then Crit. So, I mean, I've had to go and reforge and regem everything to Mastery and change, instead of swapping Mastery for hit, having to swap all my crit for hit. And obviously hit's now changed, it's no longer 17% hit required to hit the boss, it's only 15%, which instead of I think 1742 being the last hit plateau, it's now 1545 or something around that number, whilst at 85 that's obviously going to change at 90. But now Mastery is marginally better than Haste. You obviously still want some Haste, but where you can get Mastery over Haste, you want to go for it. So that's something you want to remember now, is that our weightings have changed. It's now Mastery, Haste, then Crit, as opposed to Haste, Crit, Mastery. So not a huge change, but one that's going to be quite fundamental and will require a lot of reforging and a lot of regemming and maybe even a bit of re-enchanting. But you will see a difference. I know I saw quite a difference when I did reforge and regem and everything like that. So yeah, it's only marginal, but it will be quite a bit. I mean, with Miss Pandaria around the corner, it might not really matter, but for those of you that like to min-max, then that is what you want to be doing. And now, what we can look at is the actual breakdown of the damage across your spells, because previously to 5.0, from the way I remember it, is a large bulk of it was pretty much Shadow Bolt and Unstable Affliction. If I remember, my Shadow Bolt would be about 24% of my damage, Unstable Affliction would be about 20% of my damage, and then Corruption would maybe about 16%, something like that, and then Agony, or Curse of Agony, or Doom even, would be, you know, a bit less. But now, you'll be quite surprised to see, now we can look at the Recount from Ultraxion. Those keen eyes of you will notice that it is a slightly different log, because I did have a derp moment and cleared my recount, so I had to go and do it again in order to get another fresh set of data. Never mind. Now, your biggest damaging ability is actually Agony, which is quite a change over how Agony used to be, because it used to be fucking terrible, but now it's actually really, really good. One quick thing to note, you probably saw there, Doom Guard only actually worked out at 3% of my total damage, 401,000, so it's not as strong a cooldown as it used to be. It's still obviously a good cooldown. You want to use it at the beginning when you've got all your procs lined up, unless of course the fight is something like Zonos, where towards the end he's going to have a damage increase, you know. Then, so it's not as potent a cooldown as it was before, but it's still worth using whenever you can. It now automatically resets when you wipe to a raid boss, so you don't have to worry about waiting to use it again. So yeah, as you can see, Agony is now your biggest damage. Now, the way it's being read in Recount, it's also how it gets read in World of Logs. You have your Agony dot, which is the one you actually physically cast on the target, but then you also have your Agony hit, which is the proc from Malefic Grasp when it actually causes it to deal damage. And then you'll find on World of Logs there's even a third one, which is from your Drained Soul, when your Drained Soul causes it to proc. So you'll actually have 3 Agonies on World of Logs. You should be able to differentiate for which ones are which by just simply, you know, looking at it. But you can see the damage is pretty evenly spread across the different spells. So everything is, like, you top here, 6 here, is all your dots. So you've got your Agony from Malefic Grasp, Unstable Affliction from Malefic Grasp, and then Corruption from Malefic Grasp. So they all pretty much ticked near enough the exact same number of times across the whole fight, but obviously different damage amounts. They're not hitting really as hard as they used to be, although 22k crit, 116,000, 26,000, 27,000, 18,000, 20,000. Well, that'd be, yes, I suppose they're fairly high damage, but you got a lot of tick procs going on. Haunt, as you can see, is hitting pretty fucking hard. Like 118k crit's my biggest there. And if you've got the legendary, you'll find that obviously it's only going to actually proc the duplicating of a spell with Haunt now. But you're going to be getting a lot of Wrath of Terragosa procs, and now the benefit now is that because you don't have Shadow Flame, which is a fairly weak tick, and you don't have Agony, which is a fairly weak tick, you know, all of your ticks are pretty much around the same sort of damage values. You don't have to worry about it being wasted on a shitty tick by proccing on that rather than proccing on a bigger tick. So that's sort of helpful. It's usually I'll see between 8 to 10% of my damage coming from Wrath of Terragosa, depending on the fight. Malefic Grasp, considering it's your filler, it's actually not, doesn't do a whole lot of your damage. I mean, you can see it's only down here at 8% of your total damage, so it's not that massive filler, but it's not the actual cast itself that does the damage. It's the fact that it causes your dots to tick that actually makes it such a damaging ability. Because obviously, if you then took that and then added, you know, your Agony, Corruption, Unstable Affliction procs to it, it would obviously be right up there at the top, but it just doesn't work out that way. Drain Soul, it's not doing anywhere near as much damage as it used to. As you can see, I used it at 20%. One thing to note, Drain Soul now automatically updates dynamically. Before, if you cast Drain Soul at 21%, it wouldn't get the bonus once it hit 20%. Now, if you cast it above 20%, as soon as it hits 20%, it will then update the damage and update the ticks. So you don't have to worry about hitting it. So what you could do, what I try to do, is start casting Drain Soul so that the first tick will come just as you hit like 19.9%. So you usually start casting at like 20.2% or 20.3%, just so that you don't waste the cast time of the first tick by hitting 20%, then casting it, and then by the time the first tick comes, you're down to like 19%. If you wasted 1% of execute time. So that's what I try to do. I mean, it did quite a fair bit of damage, 601,000 damage in the last. I'm not sure how long the fight lasted. It wasn't particularly long, but yeah. So it's doing an okay amount of damage, but it's not hitting anywhere near as hard as it used to. I remember I used to get 100k Drained Soul crits, but now it's only down to 52k. So, but again, with the fact that it causes your dots to tick for 100% of their normal damage, it means during execute you're getting a lot of damage going on. Stormlash, that's some shaman thing, you don't have to worry about. That's not our actual damage. And then Soul Swap, obviously, from the very beginning of the fight. So as you can see, there's not, if you actually group these together, you'd only really have a couple of damage sources, but it's all fairly even. I mean, you can see here that it's all pretty even in that pie chart. So that's where the damage is coming. Gone over the stat weightings, gone over the Simcraft for DPS rankings for tier 14. I pretty much covered everything I can think of, to be honest with you. If, as always, there's any questions, feel free to comment or whatever. I generally answer every comment I can, mainly because at the minute there's not too many coming in, but I will do my best to answer everything I can. As always, comment, like and subscribe. The video will be going up on raidguides.com, so feel free to check that out for any future videos. And I will see you guys in Mr. Pandaria with my next video. Take care.